Welcome back to Eternal Threads, Fabric of Faith. In this series, we explore churches of various denominations and share our experiences with you. Today, we're excited to discuss our visit to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Rootstown, Ohio. Having visited this local church multiple times, we are eager to share what makes this community special.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back to Fabric of Faith. We're very excited to talk about a church that, we've gone to a few times already and was kind of one of our first churches we went to consistently.
Yeah, we even considered becoming members at one point.
Yeah, we didn't know what all the rules were. There are some specifics. They don't drink alcohol. They don't drink coffee, which would have been, we didn't quite understand at first what we were getting into, but there's so much good stuff there that we did really enjoy. And a lot of those things, reminded us of some of these stories of these early Gnostic Christian groups who were persecuted for, letting women speak, for, one of my favorites was for drawing lots and letting everyone pastor and speak, rather than just having one main person. So they do a lot of really interesting stuff I think it's a good baseline.
Yeah, it's a great church. I always enjoy going in there. There's not a single person that's, that you don't want to be around. They're all very happy, welcoming people, and it's always a good time.
And we really did meet some great people while we were there. So I do want to give a couple shout outs, though, to those that are listening. Today, we don't have an interviewer, but we're going to talk about the dynamic of their church and, why it's a little bit different. But from our experience, there's some people that really stood out. One of those was the Lawrences, Eric and Emily. Emily was great because she hooked us up with the Kent State Chorus. We were looking for a choir, and I forget even how she heard that. But somehow she found that we were looking for a choir. Maybe we told her, and
You probably told her.
I say a lot of stuff. True
you
story.
do, yeah.
But she gave us a good recommendation. She was in the choir with us, so it was, a nice relationship to have someone we kind of know to do something that, especially that you've never done before.
Yeah, it was an adventure for sure.
So because of her, Emily was in her very first choir.
Yeah. So
kudos for sure. The other group though is the Mars family.
Oh yeah,
they're a wild bunch, but not wild, but like they're an amazing, impressive group of people. Great family. The one thing that stood out is we were invited to a birthday party for a gentleman named Dan Mars, and it was an experience.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
I have never once in my life heard the happy birthday sung like beautifully, like angelic.
4-part harmony and everything.
I don't know if they planned it. I don't know, because the elder Mars family had this beautiful little hall in their backyard. It was like a big giant man garage, and it's a big gorgeous place for just in someone's backyard, but just even the acoustics bouncing off the walls of that place as they were singing. I've never heard a happy birthday song. That was so gorgeous. Me and Emily were stunned. We were just looking at each other. We had to stop and just like wide-eyed eyeball each other and be like, is this real? Is this real life? Are these people real people? But yeah, a lot of them are very, very talented.
And Dan Mars himself had a band, and he was playing the guitar, and then they were passing out little instruments so we could all participate, and it was great.
It was funny. It was almost like, elementary, middle school, and everyone had, but it was amazing. Like I was a teacher, for a couple years there, and like I love taking things I did with kids and translating them to like work life, adult stuff, because we don't get to play as much, and we get all awkward and sit there and watch. But like, so I forget the little fish with the scales that you get
the wood.
They're,
I can never remember what it's called.
I know. These are instruments that I've literally only used when I was in elementary school, and I have never seen again since.
I keep wanting to call it the glockenspiel.
Sure.
I know that's not right.
Let's go with that. But
Wood
that's the beauty of it
instrument.
is they were, wood blocks things, but like it was so everyone could participate. It was so you could be involved. You didn't have to like have some kind of special ability they did a really wonderful job. That was a really kind of special thing. And we've really, really enjoyed our connections with everyone while we've been there. But let's talk a little bit.
Weiro.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah, I believe you. I like glockenspiel better, but I know that's something totally different.
I don't remember even what that is.
But here's the beautiful part about the Church of Latter-day Saints. So we're going to talk a little bit about our experience, and then we'll get into the service that we had on Sunday. First of all, the Mormons. Okay, we did speak. We'll have an episode out in not too long talking about the Latter-day Saint history. But we did find out they are, actively kind of going away from the Mormon title and really trying to focus on the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints. So that's a thing. But they really do a lot of really kind of cool stuff that I really appreciated. And one of those things is really that community focus and community operation. We did find out, which we'll hear, more about in a future episode from them themselves, which I didn't know, is there is not one single paid person in the whole church.
Yeah.
From, deacons to to really everybody. I didn't even know the missionaries. So I do respect that they have an entire kind of missionary system, which we'll talk about because the person who spoke was just got done with her mission trip, at least one of them. And even the missionaries that we found out, I think it was like the parents have to pay at least somewhere of like $500 a month. And a lot of them work through it. So they, it's not something they just do to get paid to do. They do it because they love to do it. And they love their community and they love God. And I respect it. I highly, highly respect it. I had no idea. Now, the other thing is because of that, and like I was saying a moment ago, is pretty much everybody has an opportunity to give part of the sermon.
Yeah.
They have
men and women.
Yeah, men and women and youth and adult.
Yes.
is a better. Every single time we've went, and we've been multiple times, every single time there was a youth, preacher or someone came up from the youth group or one of the younger kids and told their sermon. And then they might have a guest or something like that too. And they talk about business a little, ward, updates and that type of stuff. But then, one of the adults would get up and give their sermon, and it was different every time. Now, that can be both good and bad. I ultimately think it's very good. The only thing to be mindful of is sometimes as an outsider, I brought my mother one time and she didn't feel it as much. I was already kind of integrated. I sort of knew what was going on. She was, she is working on a stronger relationship with God herself anyways. But yeah, at that day, there was just a couple, I can't remember who or what, but there are sometimes you go and it can feel like speech class in high school.
Yeah.
So
there is an upside to that, though. It's, practicing things that maybe you're not comfortable with and forcing yourself out of your comfort zone. And it makes you grow.
Yes. And that, yeah, exactly what I was going to say is that, and once again, I think is positive because now everyone has a chance to kind of preach a little bit, and it helps with confidence. It helps like maybe feel more confident going out and, proclaiming the gospel when you're out in public and in other places too. So, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
But if you are a visitor and you just happen to swing in one day, you could get a little bit of a clunky sermon. And if you're used to these, especially these mega churches and stuff where they're just like, there's a band on stage and they're doing backflips,
laser lights. Yeah.
You know, so it's a different experience, but like, that's the beauty of it, you know? So it is unique.
It's homey. I like it.
It is. Yeah. And once again, there's the pros and cons. The one opportunity that I do see, of all things, is that we've been to a few churches that will do like, 10, 15 minutes of, whatever. And then they'll have all the kids come up and do like a quick children's story ministry. And then they'll go off. That is the only thing I did notice is I do feel bad not only for the parents, because I appreciate too, because same things, like I understand the idea that the kids should be part of it, should, learn how to, be in that routine, all that stuff. But there are a lot of young kids that make a lot of noise.
A lot.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's something about the people who like proclaim all the time and make noise, but
yeah, that's one thing. But these are like screaming children and running around in the pews and
God bless. I mean, they're beautiful little kids, and I mean, they're just cute little kids. But it's really hard for me to pay attention.
Yes,
because the noise and stuff. But then sometimes I like to watch them because they're cute and just playing. But I'm not paying attention. And if I had like 2 or 3 kids and I had to sit there and corral them the whole time,
and they're not paying. It's like, why come then? Because they're going to be watching their kids the whole time.
I mean, obviously they want to be there for church and everything. But I would love to see the parents have an opportunity to worship and to be active, without having to babysit the whole time.
Well, and Joseph mentioned in his interview that we had with him, he mentioned that they used to have something separate for the kids, and they changed it right before COVID happened.
Yeah.
So that they used to have 3 hours sermons or worship, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And you don't know Joseph yet because we haven't put that out yet, but we'll put that out.
Right. We'll get there. But so they used to have a 3-hour worship on Sundays, and now it's 2 hours. So there's an hour of the sermon and the music, and then there's an hour of Bible study afterwards. And then they're supposed to do the 3rd hour at home with their families now. So I guess that used to be organized a little bit differently.
Yeah, we'll go back into that.
Yeah.
But the other, nice thing about it is, not only, well, and then same thing, just to mention this too, because they do also do the congregational kind of choir where we all sing. For some special things, they'll have a choir get up and do some, musical numbers. So same thing. I don't know how, I guess it's just doing it year after year after year for people who are, have been devout their whole lives, but like, I don't know the tones of the songs. So I have to mumble along, and I can hear people around me kind of mumbling along. I'm trying to like identify someone who's hitting the pitch so I can jump in. But yeah, it's the duality of all things. And that's what's so neat, because we've been to the big churches where you just stand and clap and they're putting on a show. But, it does feel sort of impersonal sometimes.
There's less connection.
Yeah. So it does sound imperfect, but, that's part of the journey.
Well, and I know someone who has gone to that same big church that we went to, and she said that she tried multiple times to get in contact with the pastor or someone that's connected with the church, and she never got a hold of anybody. They kept trying to tell her to make an appointment, and that's just that's not right. If you want to just at least have a conversation, you should be able to have a conversation.
Yeah, and we made a lot of friends right off the rip, which was nice. I remember even the missionaries invited me over as kind of like it's like a get to know you, see if we want to take it further type of a thing, over to the Mars family. And I sat there and I told them a whole bunch of nonsense. Not nonsense, but I told them, I was honest. Like I told them, I was like, hey, I had this this experience that kind of was my catalyst, and this is what I feel like God's calling me to do. And I gave them the whole shebang, and they just sat there and smiled and was like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And, and it's like, it's in the name of Latter-day Saints. And, you get a lot of people that are just like, the Bible, that's it. God never talks to anybody. God will only tell you the Bible. Like and we're going to talk about that when we go into the sermon, because even, the youth, sermon, which we'll go into, she mentions that kind of stuff, that the word of God comes from everywhere, from everyone, from every day. And that's what that's what hooked me very well. Two things. One, that, and then also the story of Joseph Smith, going church to church and being like, I don't know what church, God. And God's like, start another one, but whatever. But like, still, like, that was kind of my experience. Like, why is there so many? Yeah. So I identified with that sort of, very, baseline sort of, story from its origins. But just, I feel like God talks to me all the time. And if I went to a church and she was like, no, that's, who knows? We haven't had too much pushback on that. But if someone told me otherwise, or if that was like, some evil voice, or that, it was impossible, then I automatically just do not agree. Yeah. So the fact that I told them my testimony, and they were like, yeah, right on. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't stress you guys out, like weird you guys out, anything. But yeah, so that was definitely, a kicker for me. And once again, we met a lot of great people. Yeah. Right away.
Yeah, I do really appreciate that about not just this Rootstown ward, but we've been to a couple different wards of the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints. And they're all very open-minded people who are not quick to accept a new idea, but they're quick to at least ponder it and consider new input. And there's not a lot of places you get that.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because that's kind of why we don't have an interview. We try to set a couple up, but it's almost two things. One, without like that main spokesman. Well, actually, it's a couple layers. One, without like a main spokesperson, like a pastor that's always there talking, there isn't quite that figurehead. Two, it almost seems like they're almost too humble. Because I asked a few people, and they're like, "Oh, well, I don't know if I'm the best person to talk to. Why don't you ask this person?" And I go ask that person, like, "Well, I don't know if I'm the best. You should go ask." And I'm just like, "Okay, we'll talk about it." But like we really enjoyed all of them, and it was one of those things that without that like main spokesperson, it was actually kind of more difficult, to get this done. But therein lies sort of kind of the beauty of their spirit. So it's the duality of all things is definitely, really interesting. And the fact that nobody is really paid to be there. There's less of an aggression for like, getting people to come every week. And like Larry talked about in our last episode, sometimes churches get a little, feisty with their congregation, because if they lose people, they'll lose money. Right. Where here they don't really care. I mean, they do, don't get me wrong, but like it's not like a high priority.
They're not looking at the numbers.
They're not pushing people. They're not, as aggressive with retaining and like, hey, if you show up here, then it's God's will. Right. And if not, like then maybe we'll see you again.
Yeah. With this place, people are people and they're not numbers.
It's almost like too nonchalant, but like that's the beauty of it. If it's in God's will, then you'll be there, and if it feels right, it feels right. And we're just happy that you're here today. Yeah. So it's actually kind of nice. Now, the other thing that we think almost all churches should do and copy from these guys is we love the fact that they have Bible study in class right after service. Yeah. I haven't seen it. I mean, I'm sure it's happening somewhere. We're just early on our journey. But I haven't seen another church yet have it right after. I've seen people have it earlier, and no offense, it's I don't get to sleep in that often, and
that's what a lot of people probably don't show up to those if it's before the service,
like 8, 9 in the morning. Yeah, I mean some people will, but we're a little younger too, and it's
Typically, people don't show up to earlier services, even if it's at 8, 9 in the morning. That's why a lot of these places are starting at 10, 11.
Yeah. And come on, it's Sabbath.
Yeah.
Come on, take it easy on me. Or I've seen plenty of places that have their studies are like, the men's, women's groups, but it's like a Tuesday night, Wednesday night,
Yeah, someone's house and it's completely separate, and that's fine. It's great, especially if it's, a bigger church and you've got multiple different groups in different cities that are a little bit closer to where you live. That's maybe that's better for that church, but for this, since you're already there, all you have to do is walk into a different room and just stay another hour.
Yeah, especially when you're early on the journey, like you do want to learn. You do Bible study is important.
Yeah,
and having discussions with other people about this stuff is important.
Yeah, and it gives you an opportunity to ask questions if you had any questions from the sermon or any kind of input that that's one thing that I would like. Is if we were to start a church, I would like something that would be like a round table kind of almost situation where we're just talking to each other. It's like a call and response sort of a thing.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but that's how we got to know half these people.
Right.
By sitting there and bouncing back and forth. And I spoke up plenty of times in the groups and put my input in, and they appreciated that, and I listened, and it was fun. But yeah, they I definitely said some stuff to them, which is fine. I remember the one day, because I'm also working with, trying to do some other work. And I gave them this, another aggrandized story about I think God's calling me to do this and this. And I remember saying that in the men's group, and they're just like, cool. And the one, older gentleman came up and gave me a couple contacts of people I should reach out to. And I'm just like, wow, you guys don't think I'm a nutcase.
Yeah. Well, what I love, they call the women's group Relief Society. And we've been there. I mean, we went there for a good 6 months, I think, at least.
Yeah, somewhere. On and off a little bit too, but.
And they go every other week. So one week it's everybody combined, and then the next week we're separated into men in one room and women in another room.
Which is important too.
Yes, I love it. But every single time I'm in the Relief Society room with all these ladies, I always wind up tearing up over something because we're sharing stories or something's happening in someone's life and we're just helping each other through it. And, that in tandem with discussing scripture and talking about faith, and, it's beautiful. And it just, it's wonderful to be a part of that.
Yeah, especially early in my journey with this thing too. I definitely was overwhelmed by the Holy Spirit multiple times. I cried probably at 5 different sermons. I actually did on Sunday too, because it was the Mars family. So it was their daughter Kat who had gotten back, which we'll go over what she talked about in just a moment. But just watching how good she was. Oh,
brilliant.
She did a great job.
Yeah.
She did a really great job. And because of my, baseline relationship with Dan Mars, I just looking at the back, because he said it a row or two ahead of us. And I was just looking at the back of his head and just being like, he's got to be so proud.
Yeah.
And I actually started crying because I just can only pray that our future son, daughter, whatever, is going to be so eloquent with preaching hope and faith and the gospel. Mm-hmm. So I was so proud for him that I just got overwhelmed, which I thought was funny. But especially, the classes, the joint classes are great. The men's and women's classes are great. It was always funny to compare notes with Emily after the sections, because I'm sure you guys can guess, the women were well prepared and organized.
Yes, always very organized. Yeah. One person speaks at a time. It's very civil.
The men, the men did a good job, but I mean, come on, as men, the women are always the ones keeping us together. So the women's groups were a little cleaner usually, which I always thought was funny. But hey, we're men. It was fun. It was a little bit of boy talk in there too, what I mean? So it was pretty cool and very comfortable. And that's what I liked about it so much. Now, we won't go rabbit hole on this one. Okay. We'll save this for maybe a whole nother podcast. because we're still learning, more and more about it. The classes did cover lots of biblical topics, but they also covered a lot of topics from the Book of Mormon. Now, the Book of Mormon is definitely a whole conversation. I'm still trying to, learn more to see what the Book of Mormon may have that the Bible doesn't. Mm-hmm. But I definitely want, to dig into that in the future. I want to see, we're gonna try to find out more about it. Historically, I definitely have some questions on it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk to somebody who may be able to fill in some information about how it historically kind of connects. Mm-hmm. But either way, the thing I love about it is, for those that don't know much about it, it really integrates like the Native American tribes with the story of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Okay. And agree, disagree, good, bad, indifferent. I don't really care much, because if you look at other groups of Christians, that's the whole point of the Christian story, is everybody is invited and involved to, become like Christ. And two, when you look at there's some Chinese Christians that say that the wise men were Chinese, and that's part of how the Chinese tie into, or Chinese Christians tie into the story. But then there's also people in India that say the three wise men were Indian yogis.
Yeah.
And Jesus then went to India and studied, the Vedas and those types of things during his teenage years, and that's where he learned oneness and some of these Eastern philosophies that he then brought back into, the communities of the Torah.
Right.
So, there's a lot of things that we really can't prove.
Right.
But by creating a narrative that includes, people, you go back and you look at the way, some of the churches handled their relations to the Native American tribes, back at that time, it wasn't always easy. It was pretty harsh in a lot of ways. So whether you believe in the truth of the Book of Mormon, it contains a lot of great wisdom. It contains a lot of similar biblical type stories that hold these values. And you see that in every person that's there. I mean, it's everyone I met there was just in love with worshiping God and following like a good path and setting the example. And so whatever they're doing isn't wrong. They're doing a great job. They're some of the most talented and, humble and nice people that I've met at a church. Mm-hmm. So I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Wish your clothing could preach louder than a Sunday morning sermon, all while supporting your favorite podcast? Well, now it can. Introducing Eternal Threads, a clothing line that's divinely inspired and possibly more uplifting than your morning coffee. Like many of us, I wear my heart on my sleeve, but now I also wear my faith on my chest. Ditch the corporate logos and represent what you believe. Get ready to turn heads and maybe even hearts with our vibrant collections at eternalthreads.co.
Discover elegance with sterling adornments, where genuine gemstones and sterling silver craft stories of beauty. Each piece, a testament to God's gifts, is meticulously handcrafted for your moments and milestones. Embrace the unique, the pure, the divine. Start your journey at sterlingadornmentsus.etsy.com and find a jewel that speaks to you. That's sterlingadornmentsus.etsy.com, where every piece illuminates your inner glow.
Let's talk a little bit about the actual day and what the gospel was like that day. So it always starts with just a little bit of business. Also, too, the nice thing is I see about a different person up there every time too. So the
Conductor.
Conductor. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Whoever. What is it? Well, what's the paper say?
Oh, you know what's really funny?
Yeah.
You know what word's on there?
What?
Conducting.
Yes. Yeah, conducting. Yeah, and it was actually Eric. Eric, once again, the Lawrences. Shout out to them. But yeah, Eric was the one kind of leading the sermon.
There's also the president as well, I think.
Yeah.
I guess that's higher up.
Yeah,
I don't know how it works.
Yeah, we're learning. I think the president, though, is more of like a regional aerial. I don't think that's like just the president of that ward.
Okay.
But yeah. But once again, sorry if we're a little off on this, but we're going to give you the gist. So early on in the service, it really just starts with, a song or two, and then they go pretty quickly into the sacrament.
Right.
Theirs is unique. They don't have, they don't drink alcohol at all, which alcohol is a pretty harmful substance.
Right.
If you ask me. I mean, do we drink once in a while? Emily have a glass of wine here and there. When she does, I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll join you. But like, it's something that we have really gotten away from.
Right.
Could we join the church and not drink ever again? Probably.
Yeah. I wouldn't miss it. Honestly, I think that would be worth it.
Yeah. We'll sidebar here for a second because, the thing I'll say about alcohol is there's an article I read and it was called you could probably Google it, called The Spiritual Consequences of Alcohol Consumption. Mm-hmm. And had some kind of, maybe too funny stuff with like demons and stuff, but like, that's why they call it spirits. That's why they're called spirits. It's, in my opinion, when you drink alcohol, you're really sort of infusing yourself with that spirit. And that's what's so interesting, because if someone gets, tequila drunk or whiskey drunk, or they're very different.
Yeah.
And how often, what is usually the case when you get sick? It's usually when you're drinking like a beer and a shot and then this type of liquor, that type of liquor. And it's like, there's all these different spirits in you that are battling. And that's kind of what gets you even more upset.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of funny layers to that, because same thing, you look at like old ancient, like alchemy, and some of like the more like ancient philosophies, they always use alcohol, like a pure alcohol to absorb the essence of something. Like if I wanted to make...
Well, yeah, that's how essential oils are made.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. If I wanted to make that, I can take like a, lilac plant or something and soak it in alcohol for a while, and it will pull the essence of that out. Mm-hmm. And then you leave it to dry, and then you can use that base form to create oils and stuff. But alcohol scientifically and, spiritually has a pretty major impact. And, conspiracy theories aside, like, I've always been curious my whole life of why, of all these other substances that are so illegal, especially when you look at like marijuana being like a Schedule 1, it's the same as, it's crazy because marijuana is a Schedule 1, but fentanyl is a Schedule 2.
What?
Yeah. So marijuana is more dangerous than fentanyl, according to the U.S. government.
That's boo hockey.
Okay. Yeah. So it's, I don't know. But I just I was always concerned with the impact of alcohol on people, on families, on, I went to college, and the fact that getting blackout drunk is celebrated in college. Like I've always had some problems with drinking. So, but what they do then when they, do the sacrament, they do, the bread, the cracker, the bread, whatever, but they do a shot of water, instead of the grape juice even, because, which most places don't do wine anyways, let alone, what I think the sacrament originally was way back when, but that's a whole different conversation. And I got a book to to back it up, but
Right.
but we'll talk about that. But yeah, so it's interesting. They do, a water and crackers. So they start with the sacrament. So, similar to your Catholic, Orthodox, or, other beliefs that hold that as one of their main principles. So I respect it. And it's very, very,
Commendable.
well, yeah, it's commendable, but it's very, it's familiar is what I'm looking for, to other church kind of, processes and stuff.
Okay,
and
yeah.
it's not like they're just like totally different, and, they still hold a lot of this stuff very sacred. It's just a little different because of what their core beliefs are, and not terrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We could always probably use a little water to sober up to the Lord, but
Right.
but let's talk a little bit about young Kat Mars, because that was our first speaker.
Yes.
So
And real quick, I'm pretty sure she's close to my age.
she's 21.
Well,
Yeah. Well,
6 years off.
yeah, she's younger, but she had just come back from a mission. I had to ask how old she was, because I'm just like, man, she killed it.
Yeah.
Like, she gave a much better speech than probably I could have. I was very, very impressed.
Yeah, well, and she went up there and initially said that she said something like, I didn't think I would be nervous, but here I am shaky, and
Started to sweat.
and she said that her confidence in herself was what did she say? I guess I didn't write it down, but
I remember she said that she said something about imperfect confidence.
yes,
Which
yes,
awesome.
yeah, that was a beautiful way to say that. But she did great.
Yeah, and that's kind of the theme here, is she had a way of saying just a few things that I'm just like, wow, that's like that imperfect confidence that I was like, oh, that's a great flavor of saying that, how,
Yeah.
How you did that. Because then afterwards she had, like, I forget, she either prayed or said something along the lines of, she hopes that we keep all of our spiritual eyes open
Yes.
to message from everything, messages from all messages. And the thing that stuck out, that even the things that were unsaid, I thought was pretty profound.
Yes.
So not just like, like, make sure you're, I hope you're, not only here and witnessing me, but I hope your heart is, the spiritual eyes, I hope your heart is open to not only what I'm saying and the sermon of the day, but to conversations you're going to have here, to conversations you're going to have later, to people you'll talk to throughout the day.
Well, not even just conversations, also just being silent in your mind and being open to what God might want to say to you.
Yeah. And once again, even, and that's where it kind of hit me too, the things that are even unsaid.
Yes.
I thought was awesome because, sometimes, like as an example, it's, sometimes we expect an opportunity to arise, or we expect something to happen and it doesn't. And
Right.
a lot of times we'll see that as like, oh, well, everything's terrible, but it's all with purpose. So even the things that don't happen are wholly on your journey, because they're leading you to exactly where you need to be.
Right.
And they're teaching you something if your spiritual eyes are open.
Yes.
So I thought she nailed it. She nailed it. And then she went into a piece about that we are all chosen.
Yeah.
And he has chosen you, every one of you, to be his imperfect vessel and to work through your imperfect confidence.
And she said, choosing Christ is the most important decision you can make.
Yeah. And as she went into it, the next thing that really stood out was she was talking about, about pain. And even the things that, you find are painful, like there really isn't anything that you cannot handle, that
Right.
you cannot endure, because he is with you. Christ is always with you.
Yeah.
And this can go back to our story from the egg, is there is not a single pain, no matter how tragic or hurtful, that you can think of, that he hasn't experienced first, that God hasn't experienced first,
Right.
that Jesus hasn't experienced first, and has already been there, and he knows exactly why he's asking you to experience that pain, or to grow through that pain, or to be the example. It's all part of a lesson. It's all part of the gift. And, once again, just like the egg, if, there's some truth there, if we have to literally live every single life in order to become like God, how do you think God got there? He went through all those pains.
Right.
He knows what that feels like. He knows what isolation feels like. He knows what hurt feels like. He's not asking you to do something he hasn't already done.
Right.
And how much do we need to remind ourselves that as parents, as teachers, as, all these other things? And how much easier is it to relate to somebody? I have a few friends that, used to be addicts and are now substance abuse counselors.
Wow.
And even at the Light Church, I forget his name, but the one gentleman was a prison preacher.
Don?
Yeah, Don.
Something?
Yeah. Don, he preaches to prison. Like, everyone has a story. And, that's even what we've kind of learned over, this past several months in this journey is it's often easier to preach to people when you start with your darkness.
Yes.
When you just like, listen, I was broken in so many ways. And look how, just lay it out. Like, I used to do this terrible thing. I've done these terrible things, but he saved me. And the communities of people saved me.
Yeah.
And, from this, not only, from this 21-year-old girl, but she, she was a great presenter and she definitely presented this very well. Afterwards, then she went into, which, there's so many things I just felt like I felt she did a great job. But the next was going into about how following Christ is difficult and painful on its own.
Yeah.
And you have to choose every single day. Even me saying being a Christian has gotten some ire from different places. And there's a lot of people that, maybe grew up with churches that, they've gone away from. So when you say that, I'm a Christian, they associate all those negative experiences that they may have had.
Yeah.
Whatever reason that they may be leaving the church, and they just think that you're that. And so I've had to re-explain, well, this is, I'm a little bit more of a, the kingdom inside of yourself and, a little bit more of a mystic, style Christian. And,
right.
and that's even a real thing, so it's hard. And the things we have to sacrifice. And, Emily and I have lost a lot of friends and a lot of people who aren't willing to walk the path, and we have to choose Christ every day. It's not easy.
Our lives definitely took a 180, but for the better.
Yeah, and that's where she, then went into talking about, we really do, it is difficult, and we really do have to give, everything over to him, but it's only for him to transform it.
Right. Yeah, and she did say, why does this church ask so much of us? Why do we have to do so many things? And, with the missionary and, all the things that they have to do, and giving up alcohol if they used to drink, or, whatever it might be. And she said that the church asks so much because Christ requires work, requires you to work because he put in that work.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to be like him, we have to make those sacrifices. We have to put in that work.
And it's sort of alluded to, to even our belief of Christ consciousness. There's, different, belief systems out there. Like, the second coming of Christ is, the man himself coming down and judging us and sorting us out. But we more believe of, the evolution of all of us being like Christ and having Christ consciousness, not, just Jesus being the only one that's ever going to be like him.
Right.
And that's where she talked about the covenant that we have with God, and what a better person to try to be friends with than the perfect person who we can ultimately try to be like.
Yeah.
Because it aligns us with a perfect being. And who else would we want on our side, or what other example would we want to follow, and who else would we want to go into an agreement with than a perfect example of what we should be doing?
Yeah.
And it was funny because I forget what we were just watching or listening to, but they were just saying what if one day we all just did our very, very best to act like God would, or act like Jesus would, Like, what if one day we just took it upon ourselves to do every last thing we could to be like that? What would that day be like?
I think that was the Joe Rogan, Terrence Howard
Was that?
podcast episode. Yeah.
That might have been.
Yeah. At the very beginning.
But that's what's nice is, she took that like heavy burden. She was like, look at what we're trying to do. I understand that you can be overwhelmed by those high expectations. Like, I understand. But this is why we give him everything, is so he can transform it and we can have this example. And along the way, and this is what I love too, because, you get to some places that are more like you're going to hell, but she was like, listen, God the Father is compassionate and loving. Like, he does not expect you to be perfect. He does not expect that. Like, he expects you to make mistakes. You are forgiven. But if you're not at the very least looking to strengthen your covenant every day, then it's going to decay. Then you're going to lose it. So you do have to wake up every day, choose God, and just try your best to strengthen your relationship.
Yes.
And if you fall, it's okay. Get back up. He's a loving father. He's not a, judgmental father. He knows exactly what you're going to do, and you're going to stumble. And he just, it's the idea of, like when you lose a pet, okay? You lose a pet, some people, that just crushes them. And they're just like, I'll never get another pet. That was too hard.
Yeah.
But the beauty of life is getting your heart broken and being like, you know what? I'm jumping right back in there.
Yeah.
I'm going to go love again.
Yeah.
No big deal. I understand it's part of it, and part of love is pain. And I'm going to just make my love even bigger and get 2 pets.
Yeah.
That type of stuff. But yeah. And then, same thing. She reinforced that with, when you repent, your repentance is not an act of shame. You shouldn't ever go into repentance, or the idea, whether it's, maybe you're Catholic and you go into the actual confession, or once again, you're just having a private conversation with God. But you shouldn't feel bad going up and saying, hey, I'm sorry about doing this. Because, how many people do we know that like are so shameful over what they did that they'll never tell you?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then you find out later, and it's a huge problem, but can you imagine, like, hopefully most people have, done this themselves. If not, we recommend it. But when you do something bad, you just go up to the person like, hey, yeah, I did this, and I truly feel bad. I have remorse.
Yes.
And maybe they could be, making up. They could be narcissistic or something, but like, God knows.
Well, and it's 2 separate things. Maybe there is shame in whatever it is that you did, and maybe that's for a reason, because if you didn't feel shame about it, then you would probably do it again, and whatever it is not a good thing. Say you hurt someone, or you stole, or whatever it might be. Maybe that is a good thing that you're feeling shame about that, but the act of being honest about it, I think, needs to be separate. I think you need to be able to speak more freely and be honest about your shortcomings or whatever mistake you might have made, because that is a stepping stone into being a better person and moving forward with your life, especially because if you don't get those things out of your brain and reconcile the relationship, it would fester and decay. Even if you just keep it inside of your head and the other person never finds out, you're still thinking about it. You're keeping that secret. And the relationship is not as strong as it could be because you're holding back. And, say you have that conversation and everything turns out well, you're going to have it's like a bonding moment.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, we're big on the idea that God is a loving, compassionate God. And, and it creates some interesting dialogue and stuff. You can look at Old Testament, New Testament God, there's a whole conversation there about their demeanor. But that's what I believe Jesus was here to show us, is that he knows what real repentance is and what is phony. And the more you just open your heart up and are honest and say, hey, I'm flawed.
Yes.
And help fix me.
Yes.
and strengthen that covenant every single day, and just do your best to seek it. That, like it says, seek and you shall find.
Right.
But big shout out, Kat Mars family. You guys crushed it. She did an amazing job. So, so very, very happy that we were able to talk about this. So next, we had actually a visiting deacon, which is another thing that I actually like. I want to say her name correctly. I wrote it down, but it's probably written there, typed out.
It's Meliana Hunsaker.
Yeah, I would not have said that correctly. Meliana. So that's kind of cool too. The fact that they're a really, connected organization as a whole. We've actually seen several different visitors from different states, from different places. So it's kind of neat, sometimes at your local church, it's kind of the same group all the time, and you have some visitors randomly, but like they actually do kind of travel amongst the churches and, intermingle a little bit. So I kind of thought that was neat.
Well, and I think she had mentioned that it's encouraged that if you go and travel somewhere or you move to a new place, if you give some kind of short speech or input in the sermon, just to integrate a little better, I think.
Yeah, and she was funny. I mean, here's the thing. I probably won't go as in depth in what she was talking about because it was chaotic.
Yeah.
But that's what I loved best, because she even said so. She was like, it reminded me of my ADHD brain, but she she said that straight up. She was like, listen, I know this sermon is going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
Because I'm always all over the place. And I'm like, rad. Okay, let's hear it.
It was great, though. I mean, sure, it might have been a little bit less organized in the way that she said everything, but she still got up there. She said everything she needed to say and, got her points across. And it was still, I don't know, if I was personally associated to this person, I would have been proud of her. I feel like
good.
As a stranger, it's kind of strange to say that I'm proud of her for doing that. But
no, it's all good. We're brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
It's all good. But it was nice though, because she's been traveling, a little bit herself, living a couple of different places. But the one that stuck out to me was her time in Hawaii.
Yeah, she grew up there.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't know if she grew up, or I know she spent a good bit of time there. But yeah, so kind of you talked about the fires. I mean, because a lot of her story was a little bit of a personal story, which is great because we don't. Well, not we, but the church doesn't know her as well as others.
Yes.
Because she is visiting or traveling or new to Ohio. I think she moved to Ohio. But either way, it was good because we got to learn about where she was from. She talked about the actual fires in Hawaii.
Maui.
And okay, yeah, perfect. I kind of clumped the islands together. My fault. But she did. Yeah. Well, she said she was born in Virginia.
Oh, okay.
And lived in
My bad.
Maui. Yeah. We'll get it down.
Yep.
But she's, she mentioned a couple things. One, that during the fires, that their church down there at Maui was left untouched. There's fire all around the church, but the church property was protected.
Yeah. And she had said that earlier in the day she was planning on going, but something got in the way and she decided not to go. And so she prayed. I think she said she prays every day to keep her family safe and keep everybody safe.
Well, her daughter
Yes.
didn't go to work that day.
Oh, yeah.
And she was supposed to go to work.
Yep.
So that was, the Spirit of God at work,
Right.
for sure. But then, even talked about how her friend was a helicopter pilot. He was like a tourist pilot thing. So got to, I don't know if she went up exactly or just, got reported back photos and stuff, but got to see some aerial views of the devastation. And that's, when she really saw that the hall itself was left unscathed.
Yeah.
Which, awesome.
Magic.
Yeah. Yeah. But then, but that was nice because then that led into, because she spoke for a little while, but it was mainly, those types of stories. But then I remember at the end, wait. She also did talk about, which I appreciate, she's organizes the young women's camp.
Okay.
Yeah, and she was talking about the young women there, and they set up let me see here. Their theme was the united in the light of Christ. And the image was like, they came with an image, and it was like a campfire with like all them gathered around it. And they were strengthening their testimony through each other. And like that was like the theme of it. Because I remember she talked about like the motions of a hidden fire was like the title or the theme of her. Or I don't know if it was like a verse. I forget.
I think that was someone's talk that was given recently.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because they do that too, which I appreciate. And that's kind of like the Latter-day Saints thing, is they pull from like former speeches and they pull from talks and stuff. So it's not just, biblical. It's not even just Book of Mormon. They pull wisdom from each other all the time. So yeah, that's actually a great point. I forgot where that exactly. I think it was from President Holland.
Okay.
So I wrote that there is where that speech came from. So it was kind of cool. So she like started off with that speech, said a couple things about it, talked about the fires in Hawaii, went into the women's camp and talked about their theme, which is, united in the light of Christ. And it's just like, she was just amazed at the synchronicities of, how things kind of worked out in her life. And it went from this bad fire, which, pray for everyone, and other families when that, and that happened, and still, they're recovering, but to, the church not being touched, and to then her leading this group of women who sort of used a similar theme and really found the light of the fire in Christ, so it's kind of interesting how that got flipped 180 in meaning in her life.
Well, and she also mentioned a verse. It was John chapter 8, verse 12. Which is, when Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life."
Yeah. But yeah, so it really tied together. So I guess her version of chaos translated into our version of chaos here, and we kind of bounced around too. But we're giving you a good taste of what the service was like. So hopefully we're translating this correctly. But then it was closed by President Clark, and he, the one thing that stood out there, it just kind of echoed, the synchronicity of God sometimes. And he was talking about how he, I think he was praying, that week, and he, that's what it was. He had gotten busy, and he didn't do his like hour of study of his, scripture study that day. And he's like, maybe I'll just do it tomorrow. I'll just da. And he's like, you know what? No, you've been doing it every day. Like, keep it going. Like, I know it's late, but, shut down what you're doing and get to work.
Yeah.
And he had received a message, and that message says, a communication from God, and it kind of just whispered in him to like, all right, when you get to, your church that Thursday or that Saturday or whatever, he, has some common things he does there. He's like, I need you to really lock in. I need you to take it a little extra seriously. And then sure enough, he goes, I think it was just then Sunday or whatever, but then he goes to Sunday, and the devotional was on the exact same topic. And they brought up, how to, just
how to be more mindful.
Yeah, be mindful. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But it's just, and that's what we've experienced a lot in life, is these synchronicities of life that just, we get like a little whisper of something, and you got this thing you're holding on to, and all of a sudden it manifests in a way that is external to you, that you're just like, it can't be a coincidence.
Right.
And that's what I really like appreciated from all these stories, is everyone has a testimony. And that's why we love this, the way that they perform church, is everyone has something to say. Everyone has a story, and that's awesome. And I love that. I don't, think of it necessarily as a top down, only this person who's ordained by God can speak to God, and I have to only get it through him. It's, we are all part of the divine, and they live that every day, and they act like it.
Right.
They treat themselves well. They don't, make, we all struggle, but like I see less, excuse making, less like, well, I'm a sinner, no big deal. They're a good group of people.
Yeah.
For sure. But then we did go to class. Now, class will be a little bit briefer on, because we don't know what we're talking about. Like straight up.
Yeah, they were
Straight
reading
up.
through the book Mosiah, chapter 11, or I don't know if it was chapter 11 through chapter 17,
Yeah.
or if it, okay.
Yeah, different parts of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about. We need to go back to class. But yeah, that's where we do want to really get to know the Book of Mormon, just, for reference sake. Once again, there's a lot of wisdom in all these books. So I'm not going to pretend I know anything about the actual context of it. I'm learning, I'm still catching up with, some of my biblical stories and keeping them organized in my brain chronologically and all that kind of stuff. More Old Testament, New Testament's a little easier to get through, but yeah, I started working through the Book of Mormon, but same thing. It's like, well, how do you read the Bible? It's like, you have to read that in a year a lot of times and like go through bits and parts. And it's hard to read just from front to back. Some people can, God bless them. But, trying to then...
How much do you digest, though?
Right. But then trying to read the Book of Mormon on top of that, we just haven't been in our journey long enough to have any clue of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But what I will say, once again, it was awesome being there and hearing about it. I remember at the very least, part of it was, this Messiah was before Jesus. It was more in like the BC, I believe. And it was about a tribe of people who got a leader who wasn't doing what he was supposed to do. It was like a new leader. And part of it was, and I could be saying the thing that's before this. I just remember this is one thing we talked about. So forgive me, please. I obviously have to go back and learn. But once again, they give a good opportunity to do that just by going to the church. But I just remember, at one part it talked about, a leader that sort of led a group of people astray, and their clan, it didn't do well. And even though God didn't save them, because, I think this goes along the line with, sort of my belief and, the Latter-day Saint belief of it's your responsibility to save yourself and to become more Christ-like and to walk the way. And just by doing a bunch of bad things or something, God's not going to come down and correct it. But at the very least, they made a record of it. And that was kind of like one of the morals of the story, is that, although this tribe eventually, went away or what have you, there's records of this thing happening. So that way we have a guideline of what not to do. And the fact that they are part of the canon. So it's, the good and the bad are just as important parts of the story. You don't want to just, talk about all, it's like on Facebook. We can't just put all the great stuff when secretly, like, you're getting divorced and like you hate your life and all this stuff. Like, the record is a human record. It's good and bad, and how often in life do we make a decision? It's funny because I was just listening to a thing from Bashar earlier, and there's this lady talking about, like, well, sometimes I have like 2 inner voices in my head, and like one will say, go sit here, and the other one will say, go sit there. And it's like, it's confusing me, and it makes me feel weird because I feel like it's like, what's wrong? You don't want choice? You're trying to limit choice? Is that what you're saying? Like, you want someone just to tell you what to do? Is that what you're saying? You know what I mean? It's like, you're not crazy, because every voice in your head is you.
Yeah.
Even if you're, somehow channeling or in contact with other types of whatever beings or anything, like, it's still vibrating through your intuition, and it's your version.
Right.
I mean, just like I will never in my life know who Emily is, and she'll never know who I am.
Right.
We are just versions that we've created of ourselves. Even the most intimate relationships you have, you'll never know the truest version. You can only interpret, the version of this person that you are creating. So that's what, he was making the point of, is like, you just want someone to tell you what to do. You hate choice.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? And that's why I love, listening to things from Bashar, because he kind of clowns people that way, but it's always to like an ultimate truth. And it's like, well, listen, if you go and you do the one thing and you sit there and you're like, you know what? this voice led me astray. I really want to sit over there. There's beauty in that too, because you just learn something about yourself. You learn, okay, well, I actually do have a preference. So next time the voice says do this and or do that, you can be like, no, I'm just going to do this one thing because I already know what I prefer. You know, so it's really kind of interesting. And once again, we are still dumb when it comes to the Book of Mormon. So I apologize that we can't do this justice. But we will definitely be revisiting it and going back through it. So yeah, there's a couple things that that stood out to me during it. You know, and it even talked about, I forget what exactly, but it talked about something about how we interpret things differently through the heart and through the mind.
Yeah.
I forget what that was in relation to, because I know I made my comment, but my comment stuff I know. So that's why I remember it, because I was trying to ingest all this stuff, but I'm just, I was still kind of thinking about the sermon from earlier and everything.
Yeah, it was a little hard to follow what exactly they were talking about, because that's 6 chapters of a book I've never read.
Yeah, true story. But
they did mention, she kind of tied it back into the sermon when
Messiah.
Meliana.
Yeah, there you go.
Meliana.
Yeah, names, words. We'll get there.
Yeah. Meliana was talking about how the chapel was not touched by the fire. And she said that, well, in this story, in the Book of Mosiah, sometimes you do get burned.
Yeah, and sometimes we deserve it.
Yeah.
And that's the truth.
Sometimes it's just a giant painful lesson.
Yeah, and that's what I respect though too, is because sometimes it's like people like all these awful things that happen in the world. It's like, why would any kind of loving God, going back to even then what Kat was talking about, like he's loving, compassionate. Well, why would a loving, compassionate God let this happen? But that's the duality of everything. Without pain, there is no pleasure.
Yeah, you wouldn't be grateful for anything because you're just used to it.
And this is where I kind of believe our views deeply align with that of the Latter-day Saints, and it's our responsibility.
Yes,
it's our responsibility to develop Christ consciousness, to seek covenant with God our Father, to love and to give freely, and to sacrifice whatever we need for the greater good. Because if we get too, greedy, too, focused on, the wrong things, that's sin.
Right.
Then we're in hell.
Right.
Then we burn. But like I see that as more as not like burning in all eternal damnation, because this is where I do believe in, reincarnation and stuff. And, and same thing, like in the story, it's you're Jesus and all his followers. You're Hitler and all the people he killed, So if you do live a life, I do believe you have, I don't know, but like you could come back and live a suffered life and be like, oh yeah, this is terrible. I would never do this again. And then you go through another life, you know what I mean? You have to really feel everything to become like him, because once again, he's already done it. He's felt it, and he's not asking you to do anything that he hasn't already done.
Right.
Or she, or whatever. Well, that's a whole different conversation.
So clearly we have some homework to do in relation to the Book of Mormon, but so far it all looks like it's worth looking into. I want to give a big thanks to our brothers and sisters at the Rootstown Ward Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We greatly appreciate them for being so welcoming and helpful in our journey. If you're in the area looking for a home church and they sound like a good fit for you, I encourage you to visit for yourselves. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. If you do, let them know Daniel and Emily sent you from the Eternal Threads podcast.
Thank you for joining us for another great episode of Eternal Threads, Fabric of Faith. We look forward to seeing you again for the next sermon, and until then, God bless.